to the New York Historical Society. Lo and behold, they had an old, I think it was an 1874 map. It showed both the current building numbers and the old building numbers. So I already knew that the Gibbons family lived at 19 Lamartine Place. But I just didn't know where 19 Lamartine Place was. But when I saw this map, this was my nirvana moment, and I knew, oh my God, that is the building that this current owner is trying to erect an addition over.
Was it you that wanted to get a building landmark?
Yes. So then I spent 2 months doing research on this building. Then I realized that this building had been targeted for destruction by the mob in 1863 during the Draft Riot. I also did find a reference that it had been an underground railroad station. I sent everything that I had, all the information, not only about that building, but about other buildings on the block. The Hebrew Orphan Asylum, that had already been documented. And that played a part during the Draft Riots because the Gibbons family escaped over the rooftops that were once even. During the Draft Riots, they escaped from the mob, from their house, all the way to the end of the block to the Hebrew Orphan Asylum.
When the dark of the night meets the neon light, I will find.
I submitted all this material to the Landmarks Preservation Commission and waited to see if they would landmark it.
And they did it October 13, 2009, right?
Yes, 2009.
In love and war, who's gonna keep it score? I have been, now I has been.
The way I found out that both the owner, Mr. Mamounas, and the attorney, Mr. Mitzner, committed fraud is it's purely visual documentary evidence through time-stamped photographs. And also, I have the plans that were submitted. And I mean, the plans that Mr. Mamounas submitted to the Department of Buildings are not the same plans as he actually built. He also continues to pretend that he built the apartments on the 5th story before it had been landmarked. Those apartments were in fact built in the fall of 2010, which is, like a year after the building had been landmarked. This was a development. It was built in 1846, 1847 by Torrey and Mason, and their vision was to have a block of 4-story row houses. So that, first of all, aesthetically disrupts a treasure of New York. It is also important to preserve the 4-story height for historical reasons, because the only escape route for the family was over the rooftops. I have never done anything like this in my life, and it has taught me a great deal, about community organizing. When the mob, which was angry at the Gibbons family because of their abolitionist views, I felt I had a civic duty to do it because I am an architectural historian and I love history. And since I felt, equipped to tackle this project, I felt that I must. Okay, so, there were 2 parts to this case. The first part was that the owner of the Underground Railroad station wanted to fight the Landmark Preservation Commission's jurisdiction over the building. They rendered their decision that, yes, it must be under landmarks. So that, was a victory. Okay, now part 2 of the case about that he wants to be able to keep it, that part of the hearing is still open. So now it goes before the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And so we have to pour all our energy into writing letters to the Landmarks Preservation Commission. He has cheated at every turn. He is, achieved this through cheating, and he is cheating us of our history. And we just cannot let that happen. We have to stop that. Well, I think that we cannot reward scofflaws. If this man can get away with this for a landmark building, imagine what all the other developers will do. They'll run away with this and say, well, if he can do it in a landmark building, why can't I? If he is able to pull this off, then why bother having landmarking laws? Or for that matter, why bother having a city council or anything?
When the dark of the night meets the neon light, I will find you. Doesn't matter what you say or what you do. I'm behind you. Oh,
Okay, so Fern's gonna talk about this, but I just wanted to give a special thanks. Leslie Lopez and Hassan Razak, they couldn't be here today. Hassan's actually at Brooklyn College now, so they've moved on to four-year colleges, which is great. I think they did a great job. They went out, shot a bunch of B-roll, worked with Fern. And so I really just wanted to, they can be here, but they're really great. They're great students. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I think Fern's going to talk about what has happened since and what's going on now.
So did you see those little people in the film? Yeah. Isn't that great? I don't know, how did you do that?
Oh, it's Adobe After Effects and special effects.
Lovely. And we were we were finishing this film while I was in the court hearing room. And I was with my iPhone, we're texting each other and stuff, and then I sent him photos, and it was amazing. But I wanted PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah.
Because the two things that I wanted to talk about that aren't in the film, well, a little bit in the film, but how I use primary sources to find this underground railroad station and how one does it in general, so that we can so that we can prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future. And I have an idea for that, what we can do. So, and then after that, I'm going to talk about, my whole process and how this all came about. How I organized first, on a very micro scale, my block, and then went up from there to the top, state assemblyman and senator.
Okay, so we got the picture set.
Okay, right, okay. So, yeah, no, I'm just introducing you to the Hopper-Gibbons family, prominent Quaker abolitionists, and they were just so courageous to provide shelter to slaves that were running away for their lives when it was just illegal to do so. So that's them. That photograph was taken just about when they moved in to 19 Lamartine Place, 1854. Okay, so there they are, James Sloan Gibbons and Addie Hopper-Gibbons, and their kids, and two of the kids, Lucy and Julia, were the ones who escaped over the rooftops. I had always thought they were really, just kids, but actually they were, young women in their 20s, early 20s. Okay. That's Willie. That is the son that unfortunately died before the draft riots. He was at Harvard. He had an accident. He fell. He bled. It was a bad demise. But anyway, he died, and his mother never got over it. And she kept, like, basically a shrine in the house. And so that was the thing that really got her. After the mob, just tried to destroy their house, that all his things got destroyed is what really killed her. And she actually became a little unhinged. But she fought it off, she staved it off, and did marvelous good works, working as a nurse in the Civil War, helping to establish the Women's Prison Association, which is still here today, helping young women that, maybe got into a little trouble early in life, and it helps them, find a new course in life. All these things she did, even though she suffered from depression, There was no Prozac back then. Oh, so this is, Lucy, so when she's, obviously in old age. And, these are just some, these are the two obituaries of Abby Hopper-Gibbons and James. It's somehow got cut off, but, it said a remarkable woman, one of the most remarkable women of the 19th century. And so now I introduce you to their house, which I think she called it Paradise Gained, and they decorated it pretty plushly, and they were Quakers. They weren't supposed to do stuff like that. They're supposed to be austere. So it's a nice house. It's this one, the one where the car is and the line. So they were all designed to have gardens in the front, gardens in the back, and obviously all 4 stories. Okay, so and. Well, this just shows on 9th Avenue, just to give you a sense of the times. This is the elevated railroad. It's not there anymore. My father rode it when he was a boy, and he said it was really rickety thing. Okay, so this is, see, Chelsea Now, my local paper. That's who wrote the story. So that's the shot they took there. That's at the beginning of the battle. This just shows then and now. Actually, it's been sitting that way for 8.5 years now. Okay. Well, I'm a historian, so I took photos of the roof when I saw that the workmen were on it and they were going to dismantle it. Just for the sake of history, because that's where the girls and the family escaped. You could keep going. Just
keep going.
fast.
Okay.
Yeah, fast. I took a photo of the basement too. Okay, so now this is how I located the house, because I knew that it was that they lived on Lamartine Place, but Lamartine Place was called that apparently like around 1854, just about when they moved in. And before and after that, it's called West 29th Street. So that's James, Banker. And now this is an early directory when it had been called Lamartine Place. I just found this morning, actually. So this is the old West 29th Street number. Okay, you can go on. Next. But this is, okay, you have James. Yep, okay, now this is a later directory, and now it says, you see, it says 19 Lamartine Place. Okay, you want to go next? So on the old map, 1854, it was still West 29th Street, 219. Okay, there's a detail, I just took this morning. 219, where is it?
Is it even?
Oh, okay, well, anyway, all right. So, but the thing is, 6.5 years ago, when I went to the New York Historical Society, this was the Rosetta Stone, because this shows both sets of building numbers. So here, so it says 339 is the current number. This is like from the 1870s, this map, and that's 19. And I knew that's where the Gibbonses lived. So. And then I realized this is the place where the builder is building that thing, as you saw in the film, the addition. So that's where I started. Okay. Yeah, I just. And this just shows. these are just some illustrations of the draft riots. There's no illustration of the draft riots on 29th Street, but that shows on the right the, well, there were lynchings and there was destruction of the Hebrew orphan asylum. And, well, yeah, so that was like sort of, the Gibbons is, you see, I assembled a chronology of everything that happened that day on West 29th Street, and that's one of the first things that happened, that the Gibbonses realized there was trouble because one of their relatives was staying near the, I'm sorry, did I say Hebrew orphan asylum? What did I just say?
Hebrew.
Oh, yeah, Hebrew.
Said Hebrew.
No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. That was it's called a colored orphan asylum. And they knew there was trouble because the family's relative lived near there. And so James Gibbons kept going to find out information. What is happening? He kept going to the newspaper stand, to the police to get help. So, I mean, it was a horrible thing that happened, and I'm going to refer to that in a few minutes again. This is the police report after the draft riot. And I think when I did the Google search, the police called the mob locusts, like so many times in that police report. It's kind of shocking. And it's, okay, now this is the envelope, and then I'll show you the letter of one of what the family called their precious relics. In fact, this is the letter that Willie wrote to Abby when he was at Harvard and he was asking for furniture and stuff. And Abby was kind of a little upset that he would be so forward as to ask for their special furniture that they were very attached to. But anyway, so it shows, you know, it's singed, it's torn from the fire that the mob set to the house. During the draft riots, someone stole James's mattress, and for some reason he was very upset about that. I mean, there were hundreds of people in his house, because he went in there, you know, find out what's going on, and he wanted to get his gun, which he for some reason had left behind. So he goes in there, a ton of people, and he sees someone stealing the mattress, and then later it went to trial. And, but actually it's interesting because it says exactly when he left his house and came back, so it gives us a little timeline. And so after the rioters tried to destroy their house, the Gibbonses filled out an insurance claim. And so it gives like an inventory of what was in their house. From that, I was able to figure out, you know, what their house looked like, the interior. It's a very rare thing. And this is quite poignant, but this is, so on the last page of that, of the Gibbons' insurance claim, there's a claim of someone from the colored orphan asylum. You know, someone who I guess didn't know how to read and signed X for her name. And that her, you know, items that she lost in the mob were, you know, so paltry compared to what the Gibbons had lost. And then finally, about the documents, this is, no,
Back.
no, go back. That,
Sorry.
well, it's sort of like,
That one?
no, the next one. Okay,
That
yeah. That is Abby's letter to her dear friend Lizzie, and in it she really reveals, you know, in a very frankly, what her reaction was to the destruction of her house. So, and it's at Columbia, so it's never been shown anywhere. Actually, my co-chair found that letter, but as you can see, the writing is really difficult, so we both transcribed it. Okay, so that's. I think that's all, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, you know, so through many of documents, we saw how what you do is you go to the New York City directories and find out where the people live, and then you check that against these old fire insurance maps. And now the document showing that this was in fact an Underground Railroad station, which I showed you, I couldn't find it first because the author of the book that mentioned it didn't give a correct footnote, or it was like incomplete or something. So I couldn't find it. And finally, one day, I was having a root canal. I was at my dentist near the grad center, and I just had this hunch to go in there and look up Abby Hopper-Gibbons. I did it. There was a pamphlet, and there was the document saying it was written by their friend Joseph Hodges Choate. It said, you know, this was an Underground Railroad station, and I sat there at their table with slaves that were running away to Canada. And I also found, now these things are online, you see, but they weren't back then when I first started all of this. Another of their friends said all the abolitionists had stayed there, even Frederick Douglass. I thought maybe I looked up, but there was one list showing all, I don't know what happened to it, but anyway, there was a list showing all the people that were drafted in my neighborhood. And, you know, it was, you know, quite frankly, it was mostly the Irish that protested the draft, because they had just come over from the famine, potato famine in Ireland, and here they were getting drafted into a war that they didn't even think, you know, they felt so strongly about. So, and when I looked at the list, it was mostly Irish names. It was printed in the New York Times. Okay, so my idea for how to prevent this sort of thing from happening in the future is really simple. I mean, we put biographies of famous New Yorkers, little biographies, insert them onto these maps so we know where they live. And also, some of these places don't exist anymore. So what you do is you match up the old map with the Google satellite map to see if it still exists. So that's what I did. New York Magazine just did an article and quoted some newly discovered Underground Railroad stations that Julie and I found. And okay, so now part two. This is how you do the community organizing. I didn't even know, you know, what that entailed, but it's brought me many adventures, both with the tenant that still lives in 339 West 29th Street. We've become friends, and with reporters, you know, who, like, I went with one reporter. It was at night. It was 9 o'clock at night. We were in the dark, photographing what was going on in the interior of the apartments, while the owner was not supposed to be doing any work whatsoever, except fire safety work. That's when he secretly did all the work that he wasn't supposed to. So, you know, as a result of this whole saga, I pretty much went from being a solitary kind of scholar on my block. I didn't know who anyone was except for a few people, to knowing pretty much everyone now. And now, since the court verdict, I actually have to go out sometimes with a baseball cap, my shades, and I should really put on a bulletproof vest. But you know, I've really met some wonderful people, and it's actually knit our community together. Now, I always told my students, Daniel and some others didn't know this, I say this, that we should care more about our architectural surroundings, and I show them some beautiful things, and I say we should demand better craftsmanship in our buildings and so forth. But in my heart of hearts, I thought it was pretty hopeless. And you know what? My friends, my neighbors, they all told me, forget about it. You know, you're never going to win. Developers always win. I even struck up a conversation with someone two guys at Central Park, strangers, and they worked for the Planning Commission, and they said, oh no, you'll never get this done. So, you know, take heart. You can, actually. And they told me that, you know, developers, what they'll do is they will flout the laws, they'll do their construction at nighttime, even when they have lost in court, they'll do that. But so what I did, so I was always keeping tabs on them even at night, and I'd go up on my roof every night, every morning, and, you know, and I went in there and, to tell you the truth, I took the photographs. But, you know, I knew the tenant, so I'm friends with her. So I figured if anyone caught me and said, no, I'm trespassing or something, well, I'm a friend. I'm feeding her guinea pigs. Now, this particular developer, Mr. Mamounas, he was so totally disinterested in history. He once told my assemblyman who was trying to convince him, you know, to knock down the good story, he told the assemblyman, Godfrey, his name is wonderful, right? He said, but I don't have a railroad in my basement. And he was mad at my assemblyman, and he said, are you going after me because I'm a Republican? But, you know, and so what has he done? He has committed fraud just so we can keep that illegal addition, so we can make more money. So, you know, in the beginning, I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't even know how to go about landmarking buildings. I didn't know the formal process. It turns out there actually is a form that you're supposed to fill out. No, I didn't do that. I wrote letters. This is the form you're supposed to fill out. So I wrote letters and to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, to the Department of Buildings, and to the planning, to the commissioner, right? That's who I wrote to, the actual commissioner. And I wrote to Amanda Burden, who is our planning commissioner. And it was like in the movies. I kept this because I thought it might be important one day. And I kept the envelope too, postmark. You know what? It did become important during the BSA hearing. I whipped it out. And I said, well, Amanda Burden said that building can't be more than 60 feet. And the commissioner really took notice. She was going along with the developer until I said that. So, you know, my message is document everything. Take the photos. Really important. To take videos. I mean, sometimes, you know, I kind of did it at a risk. I was hiding behind the ledge on the roof, you know. Keep your old emails to government agencies, because you need to refer to that in the future. Make a timeline or a log. I'm an art historian, so I made a pictorial timeline. And then I traced the descendants of the Gibbonses through old obituaries in the Times. And so I would go from one generation to the next and then look up the city where, you know, the current generation was, and I just would hope that I would find somebody. And I did. I did. And they lived in, of all places, Peculiar, Missouri. But we've become friends. In fact, Hiram Shear was the first one that called me after Hurricane Sandy. It was very touching. And okay, so back to the, you know, President Obama kind of community organizing, which I didn't really know what he meant. 6.5 years later, I now know. And at first, you know, I was kind of using the tilting at windmills approach. I would even write letters to celebrities, like, you know, Bill Clinton and Oprah and stuff. One day I saw Michael Imperioli in front of his old theater, and I started talking to him. I mean, these people must have thought I was nuts. But I did everything, you know, but that was actually not exactly the most productive way. And by the way, if you send letters like that, and one of them actually did work. I got Rob Rapley, who did the Abolitionist film, to write back. But if you do it, return, certified mail, return return receipt requested,